a podcast about amazing people from an incredible state. Amazing Arizonans with Mike Broomhead.
Amazing Arizonans, and again, we highlight the best stories of people from Arizona. No way you could do a discussion in this building about Arizona without Pat McMahon.
That's a nice way to start. Sucking up to the guest is a great way to start.
You know what the hard part for me is it's all true. I didn't have to make it up. And it hurts to say nice things to you in front of you when they're true.
So are we obligated to the truth then?
No,
Okay.
No, that's why I brought you here.
Do you realize? Get on, Pump. It occurred to me as I was pulling into the parking lot that you could have been a fight song if you had only gone to school in Oklahoma. Broomer Sooner.
No.
You never thought about that?
I never thought of that.
You needed me.
I have heard many versions of my last name, but not Broomer Sooner.
No, my last name, as I'm introduced to somebody, and if they're relatively new to the Valley, then say, is that McMahon, M-A-N-N? Say, no. It's M-C-M-A-H-O-N, like Ed McMahon. And then sometimes, I'm telling you, this is the God's truth, sometimes, even with a middle-aged person, they will give me that blank look. Who doesn't know Ed McMahon?
I know.
And then you say, from the Johnny Carson show, and you get another blank look.
It's horrifying.
Oh, I'm sorry. We're in big trouble if they don't know Johnny Carson.
We are in big trouble.
And Ed McMahon. Thank you for inviting me.
No, I'm so glad you're here. As you know, we've talked about some of the guests we've had. We've had great stories of people, and yours are so instrumental to this valley. Just a little background. As you know, I worked at another radio station, and the morning host there, you guys were kind of seen as bookends here in the valley because of all the years you'd spent on the air. And I remember asking him one time, years ago, before I ever met you, what's Pat McMahon like? And he said, never met him. And I said, why not? He said, because I'd probably like him, and I don't want to like him. I got to compete against him. I don't want to like him. Was radio that competitive for you guys back then?
Not for me. No, I'm sorry. You know, you do your job, and you hope the audience likes what you're doing, but I'm glad you didn't mention who it was.
Right.
Because I like him less now. No, competing against your enemy, please, I'm sorry. There's too few of us who are allowed in this industry.
Right.
To be able to sit behind a microphone like this and to talk and to chat, and when you're Irish, to be paid to talk. My
unfair.
God. And to be paid also and allowed to make people laugh when you're doing a comedy show like the Wallace and Ladmo show.
Yeah.
To do all of those things and make it a career. No, just say your blessings and be happy.
Well, to be fair, later on, he admitted that he was right, that when he did meet you, he was going to like you, and he liked you very much.
Did we ever go dancing?
I don't know. Did you? I want to talk, you mentioned your earlier career. Before we get to Wallace and Ladmo, I want to go back even further, because I didn't know this about you until recently. You came from a family of entertainers. Your parents toured the world.
Yeah. And so did I. I was with them. In fact, since this is a 4-hour program.
Sure.
And since, people just passed out right now watching it and listening. Say, wait, I don't have the time. It'll be worth your time just to listen to this. My mom and dad were a dance act, vaudeville dance act.
Wow.
And when in those days you had a theater in town, and mostly cities, many times it would be, let's go to the show, which meant 6 or 7 different acts of vaudeville. A comic, Irish tenor, big band, jugglers, and my parents did a dance act. And so you would do that and have a movie, a travelogue, a cartoon, and previews.
Really?
The entire day. But my parents also were in demand internationally, and at one point in a Latin American tour, they were in Central America, I think. They were married in Balboa, Panama, as a matter of fact, on an earlier tour. But my mom turned to my dad and said, "You know what, Jack? My wardrobe," and she did an acrobatic number, a kind of bathing suit type wardrobe, top and bottom. And she said, "My wardrobe is starting to get a little snug, and I'm not putting on any weight, and the snugness was me."
Oh.
And so she said, "I don't want the baby to be born abroad. There's just too many problems, too many different difficulties internationally. I want to go back to my hometown." He said, "Well, absolutely, fine. We'll go back." But her hometown, Broome, was Kansas, not just any Kansas, because that's a nice state, breadbasket of America. It was Leavenworth, Kansas.
Oh.
The prison capital of the United States.
Yes.
Federal pen, women's penitentiary, state penitentiary. So you mentioned Leavenworth, Kansas, and people think the same as Sing Sing and Alcatraz. Yeah. But so when I was born, I think the first words I said, I looked around and said, "What the hell is this Kansas? What, Leavenworth? I could have been born in Rio. I could have been born in Buenos Aires, right? No. Leavenworth, Kansas. Let me out of here." And so in 5 weeks, we hit the road. And I was traveling all of the time, homeschooled, until finally my mom had said, "Pat, your father and I thought it wouldn't be a bad idea for you to know what a classroom experience was." And they then said we picked a school right in the middle of the United States to be equidistant from wherever it is we might turn up. Des Moines, Iowa, Dowling Catholic Prep School, like Brophy here. And so I boarded on campus. There were about 1,000 students and 11 boarders.
Okay.
Excuse me. And the only other sidebar to this is turned out I love the institution, thought Des Moines and Iowa, great hunk of the middle of the United States. Later went to college in the Quad Cities. But later when I came to Phoenix, I was not really planning on staying. And then I fell in love with the town and said, "Well, I'll tell you what, I'll just pass my resume around." And was in the lobby of Channel 12, and a guy my size came out and introduced himself just as a friendly person. We started to chat about Iowa. And Al McCoy.
I was going to say.
Al McCoy said, "Yeah, I'm from outside of Ames, but I went to college at Drake in Des Moines." I said, "I went to high school a couple of miles away at Dowling." We started chatting a little further. And this was the Al McCoy story that I wanted to tell you. Not just that we wound up being in the same town, his college education, my high school education, but he said I worked my way through college by playing the piano, jazz pianist, incredible talent. We started talking about musicians. And after a little while, I found out that Al McCoy was the piano player in the band that played for my prom.
Oh, my gosh. Oh, my gosh. What a small world.
You know, isn't that wild? And just finding that out in the lobby of Channel 12.
Yeah. Incredible.
And what there's an example of you could be on in competition with Al McCoy, but why wouldn't you want him as a friend?
Oh, my gosh. And I got to tell you, we talked to him on this podcast. And these are the reasons why we do these stories, because of the stories that you have. And I'll tell you, I've been here for almost 30 years, 29 and a half years. And so I've met a lot of people that are natives that grew up here. And to a person, every time I mention your name as having worked with you, they all want a Wallace. They either want a Wallace and Ladmo bag or a Ladmo bag, right?
Thank you. Thank you for correcting.
They wanted a Ladmo bag or they had a Ladmo bag, and they still had it.
Oh, absolutely. And sometimes framed, and of course it's okay because the Twinkies are still good after all
of
these
course
years.
they are. Probably better.
Every single person that is a total stranger that will stop me at the produce department of a supermarket or a mall, I know automatically what's coming because they don't say, aren't you? Or I listen to you, I want. No, they start with this. So there I was in the 7th row of the Fox Christown Theater. You guys were on the stage before the movie started every Saturday morning or somewhere in Arizona with the new coach of the Suns, Holbrook, wherever it is that we were, they were somewhere. And Wallace said, Lad, it's time to give away a Ladmo bag. I've got the seating chart here. Now, the seating chart was just a piece of paper with some scratches on it because it was the same seating chart for Sun Devil Stadium and the Whataburger parking lot. And he said, okay. The 7th row, and the kid, now 65 years old, the kid goes, I'm in the 7th row. I'm going to get a Ladmo bag. Finally, after all these years, I'm going to get a Ladmo bag. 7th row, 8 seats in, and it's the kid he switched seats with. He's never forgiven that kid.
Yeah.
Because I never won a Ladmo bag, and now I'm in therapy, is the phrase. And the Ladmo bag came about, Broom, I don't know whether you've ever heard this, the Ladmo bag came out as simply as a result of us doing the show one day and realizing that as we gave away toys that the kids would pick out from George Bradbury's toy cottage.
Oh, my gosh.
Here's row after row, shelf after shelf of some really good-looking, high-level toys. And it was, we'd done bit after bit after bit. The pace of the show was like this, and into the cartoon and out in the comedy bit. Now it's time to give away a prize to the winner of the day. And the kids are sitting there, and Wallace says, so pick out one of the toys. Would you like this airplane? No, I've got one of the... So the pace of the show went right into the porcelain convenience.
Yeah.
And we said, let's just put a bunch of sponsors' products into a bag and have Ladmo signed it. That was the origin of the Ladmo bag.
Did you imagine that you would have that kind of long-term impact from that show while you were doing it? Did you realize that you had a generational gem on your hands?
Long-term impact and broadcasting, Broom.
But wait, you just mentioned a moment ago Johnny Carson. For my generation, your generation, The Tonight Show was a staple. Saturday Night Live when we were kids. There are certain things that have generational impact.
And they still are. They still are.
They still are.
But no, I don't think you ever think about it when you're on.
I don't know, because I thought maybe you would see the popularity that this is going to be.
Well, no, the popularity, there was no question, because all we had to do is go to a personal appearance, and the screaming and the yelling. I mean, go to Legend City, the theme park that we once had, and we were there every weekend at the Wallace and Ladmo Amphitheater stage on the lagoon, and Wall would come out, huge reaction. Ladmo would come out, and it was like the Pope. Gerald would come out, and it was satanic, right? Because everybody hated Gerald, as they should, because he was this valueless kid that tried to get Ladmo in trouble all the time. So, no, the response of the audience and the ratings and the revenue for Channel 5 was amazing. But to think about it, usually we thought, how long can this possibly last? And it lasted 36 years. I was here at KTAR for 32. And doing mostly talk shows in the morning. Those kinds of things, if anybody tells you that you're going to have a career like that, it's inconceivable.
But I also know about you is you love the personal impact, the personal contact with people. You've been so kind to me from the first time we met. What does it mean to you now to have people still come up to you to talk about the impact you had on their childhood?
It's the world. It means the world to me professionally. And they do that with my family, but they don't just come up and do the recognition thing and say, "Oh, I know who you are." No, they start usually with a story. I was, and this is what happened. And Ladmo was my father's bowling partner, and to be a part of people's childhood and their adult lives, and also the things that are meaningful to them that we talk about on KTAR. By the very fact that you are exchanging ideas and thoughts and hopefully positive values, as you open the show with every day, and you're giving them information that otherwise might not necessarily be available instantly. But in the car, in the home, to be able to communicate with people and do so honestly, that's the most important thing. You know, don't do as some of the talk show hosts feel they have to call attention to themselves. Don't do things that are tasteless so that tomorrow somebody says at the office, "Man, did you hear what so-and-so got away with?" Yeah, that's no career.
Yes. And well, let's talk about that career, the professional side of this, because the personal side of it was people still recognizing, but professionally, you and I work occasionally at the same television station here in town.
At Channel 7.
Yeah, Channel 7. And
this is my 22nd year.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And at Channel 7 in the studio, they've got memorabilia hanging on the wall from Wallace and Ladmo.
Isn't that neat?
It's amazing. But the professional side of it is we know this business, a lot of egos, not a bad thing, but a lot of egos. But you're the only person, I believe, still the only person that's been inducted into the Arizona Broadcasters Hall of Fame twice.
As Pat.
Yep.
But initially as a third of the team.
Yeah.
Initially it was Wallace, Ladmo, and Pat, Arizona Broadcasters Hall of Fame, and then later on as a broadcast personality from KTAR. And again, I don't dismiss the warmth of those titles. I'm in the Arizona Music and Entertainment Hall of Fame. Sometimes Hall of Fame means, my God, is he still alive? And that kind of recognition from your own folks in the business is just something. Lovely thing about it is you can't buy it.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's so well deserved. And I think, does your professional reputation matter to you? The fact that people, whenever your name comes up, I'm sure you know it, when your name comes up, there's not a bad thing to be said about you. People like you. People respect what you've accomplished. Was that part of your vision of making sure you always were perceived professionally?
Luckily, you have not met people to whom I owe money.
I've looked around for some bad stuff. I wanted some dirt.
Well, no, I just think, look, when you grow up in an environment, and I mean, I'm talking about the environment that I grew up in, where I'm in the sixth row as a kid of a theater in Saginaw, Michigan, right? And I'm there watching the show, not just my parents, but the comic and the musician and the Latin dancers and so on. And then you remember the people who were temperamental and difficult and filled with vanity and the focus of who they are, totally unrelated to the people who were on before them or after them. You know, it's like a ball club. You can't say, well, we don't need a shortstop. Yeah, you do if there's an infield hit.
Yeah.
No, the blessings that I've had, Broom, are things I wouldn't trade for anything. And I kind of wound up here, as I told you, just on an absolute happenstance. I was getting out of the Army. And
What year?
58 to 60, I was in the Army. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I know you're counting, figuring out. Wait a minute, hold it. Was he on our side?
North or south?
No. So I got drafted. So 2 years, right? And but I was even an entertainer then. I was in special services, still traveling around in a unit of singers and dancers and comics, and we would go around as a PR arm of the Missile Corps out of Colorado Springs, NORAD, and so I still got to entertain even then, as opposed to those guys that are out as military police in the middle of the night, guarding the flight line and the barracks in the cold.
Right.
Those are soldiers.
Yeah.
I was in show business. And after I got out, I said, you know what? I think I'll go to New York. I didn't have a job offer, but I think I'll go to New York because that's where radio guys go. And never occurred to me that I wouldn't be working. But another guy in the unit said, hey, I'm getting out too, but it's May. It's May of 1960. And is there any more beautiful place at that time of year than Phoenix, Arizona? And I said, you know, I've been there, but I don't remember very much about it because I was a little kid. Yeah, I'm not being waited for by anybody. Nobody's expecting me. And came down here, and Broomhead, as God is my witness, I mean, this sounds like one of those things you would make up. We went into a short-term rental, and I was just coming down to shake the khaki off.
Yeah.
I turned the television set on, and the very first show, that moment that came up, Wallace and Ladmo.
Really?
And my first reaction was, no, not another one of those sappy kids shows. I hate them. They get a guy out of the sales department that's not meeting his quota. They put a sailor hat on him. And now all of a sudden he's introducing Popeye cartoons, has no sense of entertainment, has no idea how to address the audience. He's just there to do commercials and introduce the cartoons. And then I watched these guys. This is the first thing I heard from Wallace and Ladmo. Now, they so far have not even acknowledged the fact that I'm in the audience or that there is an audience. They're talking to each other. I'm intrigued. Wallace says to Ladmo, and I didn't know which was which at the time. Wallace says, we're in trouble with the sales department again, Ladmo. And I said, what? Kids show guys don't talk about the sales department. He says, yeah, they said we're not showing enough respect for the clients when we're doing live commercials. And the clients seem to be perfectly happy. But the sales department said, no, we have to stop ad-libbing commercials. They're worried about the way we're going to do this. So here, they gave us written scripts. Now we have to do this with the script. Now, the audience is watching this as they're discussing reading scripts about a product, in this case, Ruskett's Flakes, a cereal. He says, you be personality 2 and I'll be personality 1. Yeah, right. I'm absolutely riveted. And so were the kids. That kind of honesty, and that turned into funny. Because he says, okay, you start, Lance says, oh, gosh, a Rooney, Wallace. Boy, Ruskett's Flakes make my tummy go, I can't do this. He says, I can't read this. Nobody talks like this. I'm sitting there thinking, this is real stuff. This is the real, and the kids would appreciate it because Wallace turns to them and he said, listen, you like cornflakes? These are cornflakes. Guy named Ruskin. He's got a warehouse full of these things over on the coast. So your mom takes you to the grocery store. You're looking for cornflakes. You might as well try Ruskin's flakes because what are you out, huh? You're helping the Ruskin's family out. And if you don't like them, I'm like this.
Yeah.
If you don't like them, he says, then wait till New Year's. And he and Lad tear the top off of the Ruskin's flakes and they go into the cartoon this way. Should old acquaintance be forgot? Well, they had me.
Yeah.
That was it.
So now you're a fan.
I'm a fan from watching one marvelous, brilliant, creative, genuine commercial that did not talk down to the kids, because that was the cue for everything we did. You don't talk down to the kids.
Do you think something like that's community oriented is kind of a city centric? Do you think that's still possible to do?
Sure, because kids are the same.
But even for adults, when I was young, I was born in Northeast Ohio.
Yeah.
And in
What's the name of the town?
Cleveland.
Oh.
I was born in Cleveland.
Yeah. Why didn't you say I was born in Cleveland?
Well, because I lived in a little farm town called Newberry, way up in the Northeast.
Yeah.
But when I was a kid, there was a show on Saturday nights, and it was called Houlihan and Big Chuck. And they played Charlie Chan movies, but they would do, instead of a lot of commercials, they would do bits in between, and it was all local. And even now, I haven't been in Ohio really since the 70s. But you talk to somebody from Cleveland, and you mention Houlihan and Big Chuck.
No. Right.
We don't really have something like that.
Well, one of the reasons is because it's an expensive show. We had 3 guys, big set, cartoons that were expensive, music you have to buy the rights for.
Yeah.
So those are not inexpensive shows. The guy that introduced Popeye with the sailor hat, no, you got him for $25.
Yeah.
But those are expensive shows to do, even though they make a lot of money, or they made a lot of money. And to tell you the truth, cartoons are available online and cable anytime that you want, on Nickelodeon, Kids Cartoon Network, all of those things. And I don't think they want to bother with live hosts and personalities. Channel 5 at that time had a woman's show. We called it a woman's show because it was on 9 o'clock in the morning. Rita Davenport.
Yeah,
of
course.
Right, a terrific interviewer. She had the stars that would come into town, and she would talk to them genuinely. She would cook, do recipes. And one day she came in and she says, you know what, they're not doing women's shows anymore on Channel 5. I've been let go, guys. And we were together for ages. And we couldn't believe it. And so Rita left, and Wallen Ladd and I said, I wonder where she'll wind up. I wonder what she'll do. And about a year later, we found out that she was one of the most in-demand professional speakers on the Speakers Tour. And we'd see her on PBS all the time. And then she became the president of Arbonne Cosmetics International, and currently lives in a home in Paradise Valley the size of Omaha.
Yeah.
But still that down home Rita Davenport. They used to have personalities on all the stations, and then it got to be expensive.
It does, but it's something I think that's still unique to our business, that what we offer people is reality and local, and it doesn't matter if it's in what we do here at KTAR or other stations. One of the other people I had in here was John Holmberg from the Rock Station.
Sure.
And Holmberg's another guy that grew up here, and what he offers people is a lot of humor, but everything he does is local. I want to talk about...
And by the way, in answer to your question, that local thing that is so important, because it can't be done online, it can't be done on cable, and the guy that you're watching Monday through Friday, and kids did with incredible loyalty, you could go to the McDonald's, or you could go to the Coliseum, or you could write 4th of July fireworks at Sun Devil Stadium, and we would do the act.
Right.
and you could see him. And you could also be invited down to the studio. And there are people who are executives on the highest possible level who, when they meet me, they won't talk business.
Right.
They just want to talk about the day they came down and got to boo Gerald.
It's amazing. What I want to shifting to your career in this business. I've had some experiences where I found myself asking myself, how did I get here? You have got a list of people that you've interviewed and had conversations with that is so impressive. Can you talk about some of those moments where you're thinking to yourself, am I really doing this?
Well, yeah, because there are times when you sit across from somebody and it's business and you want to be erudite and interesting enough to ask questions that cause the audience to say, oh, I hadn't thought about that. I wonder, right? Walter Cronkite. I mean, if you're going to drop news names,
yeah.
To this day, you say Walter Cronkite, and not just because of the school downtown, but because he was then the most respected man in America on the air. And it was the first person that I thought of because we've done presidents and popes, and I've spent time with Mother Teresa. I mean, when you're talking about dropping names, it doesn't get much better than that. But Walter Cronkite, Rosemary is still my radio producer, and 37 years now. I mean, you talk about a relationship that's lasted. My wife, Duffy, still says, okay, well, wait a minute. Just don't forget, I've been with you 40 years. But Rosemary's on the other side of the glass with the engineer, the board operator, and I'm doing an hour of conversation with Walter Cronkite. And his memories, his thoughts, failures, victories, accomplishments, the view of issues of the day, just good conversation. But at the end of the hour, I will never forget this. And I don't remember who I interviewed yesterday, not because it was not important, but after a while you just don't remember because there's another person. But I remember this from this many years ago. We wrapped it up, theme song came on, and Walter Cronkite looked at me, talk show host in Phoenix, Arizona, and he said, "Was that all right, Pat?" And he wasn't asking for a compliment. He really wanted to know if it's what I had in mind. Rosemary on the other side of the glass goes,
yeah.
Was that all right? And as she escorted him to the elevator, he said something very similar. I hope that that's what it is that you had in mind. I like to come in and be whatever it is that you need at the moment. You know, incredible. Cronkite, yeah.
I remember as a kid him being on TV, and back then 3 news channels, but he was the person. And be a little bit before my time, but I remember watching the videos whenever there was a documentary about the assassination of President Kennedy.
Oh.
It was Walter Cronkite at the desk making the announcement that the president died.
I get weepy.
But those moments in time for people, and the people that are able to capture them, and that's a talent that can't be purchased. To capture the emotion of a nation in that moment and express it to the nation, that was pretty amazing, incredible.
No, and anchor people and talk show people and just the communicators of your life are not all trusted by any means, either because of the fact that you hammer one message politically over and over again, or sometimes you handle something morally that is offensive. But if you don't mind, and I know you don't, of course, if you do, you don't have to show this. But again, you mention a name, and then all of a sudden, I'm saying, you mentioned President Kennedy, and I was never a news guy. They had me in the news department at Channel 5 for a while, and then they gave up because I was always watching the Wallace and Ladmo show until Wallace one day said, "Hey, come on, we'd like to have you on the show." But I would go out on an assignment to do an interview. This was the Kennedy campaign, Sky Harbor Airport, plane lands, and can you imagine this? 1960, or maybe 59 at that time, and there were four of us. There were four of us to meet the plane, that's all. Because I was the guy from Massachusetts, that's all. And I will tell you this, my first reaction when I saw him, I thought, no, wait a minute. This guy couldn't be a presidential candidate. Those are all geezers.
Yeah.
No, because they had always been geezers. There was Eisenhower and Truman, and that is not intended to be disrespectful. It's just they were all old guys. Interesting that we also have that pattern going on now. But here comes this guy down the steps of the plane at Sky Harbor in a private terminal. And I said, he's a matinee idol.
Yeah.
He's a gorgeous-looking human being. Wears clothes that it had nothing to do with expense. It's just he wore them well. And I wasn't used to people who were running for any office looking like that. And he hit the tarmac, and the crowd of us, all four of us, gathered around. And here's one I still remember, because the Arizona Republic at that time was so conservative. It was the Pulliam Press. It was Gene Pulliam, and a giant of an influence in print journalism, but way over here, extreme right.
Yeah.
And his reporter was the first one to say something to, at that time, Jack Kennedy, Senator Kennedy. And he said, "Yes, excuse me, Senator Kennedy, I'm so-and-so. I'm from the Arizona Republic." And Jack Kennedy looked at him and he said, "Yes, I've heard of that newspaper. Next." That great sense of humor that you would see later in press conferences.
Yeah.
Right?
Reagan had that ability.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. But Reagan had been an actor.
Right.
You kind of expected timing. But I've talked to people who were in Washington at that time when it was the Camelot years.
Yeah.
And he said, we used to, before Kennedy, we used to say, oh, no, do I have to cover the press conference? It's so boring, no matter who was the president. And in the Kennedy years, people would trade. I'll give you this if you let me cover the press conference, because he was so entertaining and quick.
Engaging.
Yeah.
When I was, for me, I had, before radio, I was asked to be the master of ceremonies for a couple of presidential visits for George W. Bush. And I remember being, after the event was over, waiting in line to say hello. And it was a big, long hallway under the Coliseum, and I was from here to the wall away from the limousine. And it was Luis Gonzalez and his family, Tom Lehman, the golfer, and his family, the actor Rick Schroeder and his family, and then me. And the president walked the line, and when he got to me, I introduced myself to him. I said, "Mr. President," and he goes, "Oh, I remember who you are." He said, "How was your mom?" The look on your face. I'm looking at the President of the United States. That was a moment for me, and I thought, because I had met him before, but he absolutely remembered meeting me and was as kind as he could be about my family. You know, I lost a brother in Iraq, and he had written me a letter, and he was just, "How is your mom? How are you doing?" Hand on my shoulder, and I thought, who would have ever in a million? First of all, that I'd be on stage introducing the president, but then to have the president genuinely say, "Oh, I remember who you are."
And you always know by the expression on the face that it's legit.
Yes.
That it's not, I'm going to grab you because tomorrow you're going to say nice things about me on here. No, he really genuinely remembered. I've heard so many things about that warmth.
But those moments for us, for me, and I would imagine for you too, where you're in a situation, same thing with the vice president when Pence was the vice president, to spend some time with him and have him come on the radio show 8 months, 9 months later. Hey, it's good to talk to you again. And you're thinking to yourself, what in the...
Well, as long as we're dropping president names.
No, I want to hear them.
No. And I'm just saying, I really hope that this isn't boring to you folks, because these are things that we really get a kick out of and we get excited about.
Yeah.
Anybody that tells you, I don't want to be recognized, so I'm going to wear sunglasses, and I can't stand it when people take my time, or that they are blasé about meeting people. I remember, let me tell you the precedent thing, because it's KTAR, and it happened here. This is one that was so much fun because it came as a surprise. It was the campaign for President Obama, who was not president yet. He was just, as I said at the time, you're a kid from Chicago, right? So I've got a Chicago question to ask you. And it was not disrespectful at that time because he had no official office.
Speaking of which, another very charismatic.
Oh, absolutely. And genuinely charismatic and genuinely interested in what you had to say. And he looked at you. But get this. I said, okay, Chicago kid. And I did this. Most of the time I don't have anything in mind. I don't have a direction to go. We just kind of let that happen. But in this case, I did it because I asked the question always of anybody running for public office representing a two-team town. Because the answer was always going to be the same. And I said, okay, let me ask you then, as a Chicago kid, Cubs or White Sox? Now here, that's even more meaningful because this is Cubstown spring training.
Sure.
Everybody from Chicago that doesn't wind up in San Diego comes here to live. If you shout the name Harry Carey out the window, everybody says, wait a minute, is he still alive? What's going on? And with two teams in the town, if you ask a politician,
right,
Yankees or Giants, right, Cubs or White Sox, you always get the same answer from almost everybody running for office because they don't want to make any enemies. So they always say, how fortunate I am to be representing a community that has two great organizations. Yeah. I've known the owners of both teams and what histories they have. Because they don't want to lose that fan. They don't want to lose the money from that organization.
Right.
But instead, now this is before it became public knowledge, Obama said, White Sox. And I almost got whiplash because it wasn't just he actually named a team. He named the team that wasn't the Cubs.
Yeah.
And the Cubs are, even White Sox fan call they're lovable Cubbies.
Yeah.
And there's the White Sox 47 season ticket holder. And then there's the Cubbies.
Yeah.
And there's Wrigley Field. And there's the romance. And all of these. No. Obama's running for the presidency of the United States, and he picked the White Sox and a lifetime fan.
Yeah.
And he wears the White Sox logo in some of the pictures. From that time on, I said, you know what? Even if I don't agree with him, I believe he believes it.
Well, it's funny you say that because Julia, who you met, the producer, she's from New York. She's Mets and Jets all the way.
Actually, she's from Yonkers. Not New York City, she's from Yonkers. Yeah.
But she's Mets and Jets all the way, and that's a frequent question with anybody from New York because could you be Yankees and Giants, but it's Mets and Jets for her.
And that kind of loyalty, though, extends certainly to almost all fans. You never hear a fan say, some years I go to the White Sox games and some years I go to the Cubs. No.
Yeah.
But the fact that a presidential candidate instantly said, the other guys.
The other guys, yeah. The ones you don't think I'm going to say.
Yeah.
When you look back, when you look at stuff that's happened with you and the things you've been a part of here in the Valley.
By looking back, are we talking Benjamin Franklin? Are we talking about those days?
I want to know your high school days with Moses, as you once said to me on the air.
Wow, thank you for remembering.
Oh my gosh, because I knew you'd go along with the joke. A couple of years ago, KTAR celebrated 100 years here in the Valley.
Yeah.
And you were kind enough to come on the show to talk about it. So I did the easy joke, and I said, what was it like day one at KTAR? And your response was something about your high school days with Moses. And I thought, there's a guy that can get along with the joke.
And you laughed.
Oh, of course I laughed. Because your joke was better than my joke. Mine was the easy one. Yours was actually, it was great. But when you look at this stuff, you look at what we do, I remember some of the things that I've had to talk about. The shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary, and I was not in broadcasting when September 11th happened. But being in this business now, I wonder, how does someone in this business look at something that's a tragedy like that and then somehow make sense of it and convey it to an audience? Do you ever think about those times, some of the difficult things you've had to discuss and talk about?
The key is, don't hide your tears. Be that vulnerable human being who's feeling, as I did last week, when the two horror stories, the baby who was shot in the house fire and that story. And I'm angry. I'm so angry at that man and even after he was found dead, I still said, oh, there will be a judgment day. And that's not even like me. And then followed by the shooting of the two children, and to get back at the mom.
Yeah.
How vile can a human being be? You don't hide your tears when those things happen. You don't hide your joy when the wonderful things in life that happen every day that you're sharing with the audience. Feel those things and know that they're feeling those things. It's very difficult. We were talking before we went on about Gordon James, public relations advertising man, and I, along with a unit of social workers from the Valley, going to the tsunami, and I was going to do stories from Indonesia back here to KTAR for the radio and some television footage that we sent back. And a tsunami, a wave, kills millions of people throughout this huge hunk of the world. How is that even remotely possible? And to talk to the people who were directly affected, who never saw family members again. Family members went to work down by the beach.
And literally just washed away.
Gone. And of course, the family then says, but wait, maybe they survived. How long do I wait? See, I said I don't remember. I remember that. And violence, and those kinds of things. But I got to tell you, maybe it's because of the Irish Catholic part of my life. I don't say, God, how could you possibly have allowed that to happen? I do a program called The God Show.
Yeah.
International. We get mail from Manila. And it's not denominational in any way. It's about the spiritual aspects of humankind. And sometimes you get into the tragedies. And I wind up always asking guests, at what point, if at all, did you say, why me? Why did you pick on me, God? Come on. And almost all of them will say, yeah, I did that a little bit, and then realized that it was not God's intention that I suffer. And it's it's one of those things, I think, where we are so fortunate, Broom, to be able to come in the next day and say, hey, I just saw an interview with, and then tell a wonderful story about somebody who did something sensational for another human being.
Yeah, it's so interesting you've gone down this path with this, because when my brother was killed, incidentally, Memorial Day this year is the 21st anniversary. So it is significant for our family. I'm the oldest brother, and my surviving brother, my youngest brother, who's now been a cop for 25 years, was fairly young in his law enforcement career, but a tough cop. And we dealt with things in completely different ways. Mine, I was the family spokesman, even then, long before this career. I never imagined this career. But I was the one who spoke about my brother and my family and our patriotism and our love for him and our pride for him. My youngest brother shut down and was so personal and private about it. We both loved our brother so much. We both suffered and both mourned. We just had two different ways of handling it. This job has been such a blessing for me because on Memorial Day, that I'm going to be off on Memorial Day. So, on Friday, before Memorial Day, I talk about my brother. I take a segment of the show and I still talk about my brother, and the privilege of being able to do that. It truly is a privilege in this business. I never imagined I'd be blessed with this career.
And not everybody does that. Not everybody lets people into their family, particularly into their mourning family. I'm an only child. And so it turns out...
Your parents learned their lesson.
What?
They learned their lesson.
Oh, no. They took one look and said, okay, thank you. That's all. No, this is it. But turns out I have two brothers for 30 years, Wallace and Lad Mellon.
Yeah.
And when Lad passed away, I can't tell you, because you've lost your brother, I can't tell you if it's the same.
I would imagine it is.
But when you are that close 7 days a week and you're sharing intimate things like, is it funny? Did that work? Oh, wait a minute. Hold it. This child in the audience has to come onto the set with a wheelchair or crutches, all of those things. And so Lad's family called, and he passed away that morning from cancer. He had been hospitalized for quite a while. But that was 6 o'clock in the morning. I was due on the air at 9 to 12. And I said to Rosemary, my producer, let's do the first hour about Lad. So much to talk about. And let people chat.
Was it difficult?
About Lad.
Or cathartic?
Well, I'll tell you. Well, no, it was going to be difficult, I thought, but it turned out to be such a joyful time because we were going to do an hour. We couldn't stop. We had guests booked for the next 2 hours. I did a 3-hour show. It was 3 hours about the impact of the good guy on television. Just a kind of an ordinary guy who got C pluses on a very special grading day and who was an athlete and loved sports and loved kids, and the kids loved him. But we were getting calls from Asia because the parents called the kid who was now overseas in industry. Ladmo passed away. And they're calling the show. 3 hours of that kind of a tribute to a kid show entertainment, Vladimir Kwiatkowski. And, yeah, it was one of the most extraordinary shows that I was privileged to do. Once again, the privilege that we have.
When you talk about the God Show, faith is a funny thing. We talk about it all the time. Have faith and be faithful. And I've always been a person of faith. I grew up like you. I grew up Irish Catholic. And haven't been a practicing Catholic for a long time, but taught at a church. But I've been involved in religion. When my brother was killed was when I had to rely on my faith. when I had to be the family spokesman. I was the officiant at his funeral and speak multiple times. And I remember then, you can talk about how, whether it's formal prayer or not, actually sitting, waiting for my turn and saying to myself, I have no idea how I'm going to get through this, God. You've got to do something. And never realizing until it was over that it was more impactful or better than I could have ever come up with on my own. So those moments, I've always felt privileged to be able to speak. But it's weird on the air when the late Senator McCain was diagnosed.
Oh.
I had such a special relationship with him. And I went on the air in the morning without the expectation that it was going to be difficult, just to talk about his diagnosis. And it was after the first half hour of the show, my producer or the program director came in and he said, I don't know what happened to you in that first segment of the show, but that was a disaster. And I said to him, I didn't realize it was going to become personal. I wasn't prepared for this guy that was my friend to try to talk. If I had been prepared, it would have been different. I was so unprepared for that emotion to come out in that way about something on the air. I was actually surprised that it affected me that way then. And you're right, because once you don't hide from it, it's much more easy to be honest with the audience about
The audience didn't think it was a disaster.
I don't know if they did or didn't,
No.
but I made no sense. I was all over the place. It was.
You responded to the loss of a friend. They get that.
Yeah.
You know, it's the broadcast personality that says, and we lost a person, right? And it happened to be my mom. But she had a great life, and, you know, come on.
Yeah.
That's no time for the broadcast voice. It's time to be honest with these folks, because as corny as it is, without these folks, you know what? You'd still be an electrician, and I'd be on the road with my tap shoes.
And speaking of which, do you like, before we finish this up, do you like what you're doing now? Do you like the direction of the industry and the way you're able to do it with the God Show and this kind of a platform?
Oh,
do you like how this is all morphed?
No, absolutely.
Me too.
And, well, I like doing it at KTAR. I like doing it with now that podcast popularity that this is, and the fact that it isn't even just a matter of, well, how far does the signal go from your tower? Because there's no tower when you're doing that. You're getting a chance to talk to somebody, as I said, in Singapore.
Yeah.
And finding that fascinating experience. Again, dropping names, the Dalai Lama.
Oh, my gosh.
Just the idea that you're face-to-face with the Dalai Lama, and my wife was there, Duffy was there, and a real student of world religions, and she wore, or she brought with her, beads that she had gotten in Cambodia, and authentic prayer beads, and she asked him to bless them as we were in a receiving line, and it just a delightful sense of humor, a whimsical smile. But he took the beads and looked at them, and then realized that it said in Cambodian that these were the authentic prayer beads, and that we did not get them at the souvenir shop at the airport.
Right.
And he grinned from ear to ear, said thank you to Duffy for reality.
Wow.
You know, and I love those moments that you think, yeah, that's a real guy.
Yeah. And that's the thing that I've found that I like the most is when you meet somebody, whether it's somebody you would hope to meet or just somebody that you know that is very well known, and you get to see what a person they are.
You know,
it's a privilege for us.
One of the most faithful people that I know, I say faithful now, and I'm making that value judgment, but I've been to services with him and services that he has been a part of.
I know it. What name are you going to say?
Alice Cooper.
Oh, yeah.
Did I surprise you?
Yes. No, you didn't surprise me because I've heard so many times those things about him.
Yeah, he's a guy. He does not wear it on his T-shirt. In fact, he does that character in his shows that is the absolute antithesis of a spiritual activist and an entertainer, a guy who makes you laugh, a guy who makes you move, a rock and roller. And I've known him since he was at Cortez High School. And Alice, Vince Fournier from Detroit, Michigan, originally moved here as a child, but he's a very, very deeply spiritual person right down the road, and he's the kind of guy that feels it in his heart.
I told him when I met him, well, a friend we have in common from Channel 7, Laura Holka,
Yes, yeah.
set up an interview when they expanded the teen center and put in the art school as opposed to just the music. And so we did a TV interview with him, and I got to meet him for the first time. And I said, I know you hear this 100 times a year. I said, but I was one of those kids who was forbidden to listen to your music. But what the human being that he was the same human being early in his life, but that I love that story about people like that when they're willing to show you the real people that they are.
And what he does for kids with the foundation and a kid. Okay, maybe you want to close with this. Oh, really, Pat? Are you running the show? No, I just wanted to tell you that this is, to me, an example of what goes on in a lot of different avenues. And I'm sorry about hitting the mic. If it irritates you, write to Broomhead.
Broomhead at KTAR.com.
So Alice has this wonderful foundation, different locations now in the Valley, where a kid can come in, and he's made a choice about staying out late at night and walking the streets or learning to play an instrument for free. It doesn't even have to have an instrument. Doesn't have to know whether he has any talent. He just goes in. And the Hard Rock Foundation has people, teachers, musicians who will say, welcome, come in, let's sit down and talk about what you want to do. And one kid, and sadly, he's just one of many, his teacher, after a period of time, he said, you know what? You're really doing this very, very well, but you could just stand to have a little more practice. So take the instrument, our instrument that we've loaned you, take it home over the weekend, and then work a little bit on the piece, right? And the kid says, I can't do that. He says, no, I'm telling you, it's fine with us. We don't even have to sign it out.
Yeah.
He says, no, I can't do that because my father will sell it for drugs. Oh, I mean, just say, no, wait a minute. I don't even know about that part of life other than what people tell me out of their lives. Yeah. And as it is, they just made it possible for the kid to take the instrument home and hide it.
I've talked quite often about sports and how it influenced me when I was young, and growing up in the South as I did, and the isms that we worry about in life are defeated on the athletic fields, that it's whoever's best equipped to play. It doesn't matter how many parents are in the home or whatever's going on in life, how much money you have. Sports takes that away. And I heard Alice say one day, you put an instrument in a bunch of kids' hands, and it doesn't matter what color you are, how much money you have, how many parents are in the home, it's all about the music. And I thought, wow, it's such a more eloquent way of saying what I've been saying for years. He's such a good guy, but a good guy that is dead set on impacting as many people as he can. I love him. I love him.
And without preaching.
Yes.
No.
Live it.
Now, listen, if you ever invite me back, as long as we're talking about life as a musician and a recording person,
bring Alice.
Then how about Hubcap and the Wheels? We didn't mention my group at all, recording for Capitol Records and recording in the studio where the Beatles were, Sinatra, Nat Cole. Oh, really? Could we do another show just about that? Right. Broomhead. You know what? No, if you just write The Broomer, it'll get here. And thank you for being a part of my life all this time. I love you.
I got to tell you, man, you're the best. Thank you. Thank you so much. the reason why we do this, and this is one of the exact reasons. Thanks for watching.